Morning, everyone. We're just waiting for everybody to come into the room, and then we'll make a start. Okay, I think the majority of you who are waiting are with us now, so we'll make a start, and I think there'll probably be a few others who join us over the next few minutes, but we'll get cracking. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second of our webinars in the new Keeping the Peace series entitled The Masks That We Wear. Now, especially warm welcome if you're a response officer and are watching this as part of the National Response Policing Week. These webinars have been designed to help support everyone in the policing family with their mental health and emotional well-being. So please do sit back and enjoy it if you can. And don't worry if you didn't see the first session, that's fine. There's a recording of it that you'll be able to see on the Oscar Kilo website, and it won't affect today's session at all. My name's Neil Collinson and I work for the National Police Wellbeing Service. And I'm very pleased to say that Alexis Powell-Howard is joining me again today. Alexis is the Managing Director of Fortis Therapy, who brought us the Keeping the Peace podcasts and the Duty of Self-Care webinar last month. It's fair to say Alexis is a bit of a leading expert in her field, so we're very grateful that she's back today to pass on her knowledge and expertise in this area. There's just a couple of things to go through before we start. Towards the end of the webinar today, there's going to be an opportunity for you to have some Q&A. So if you have a question at any point, please do put that in the chat. I'll collate them all and I'll endeavour to get Alexis to answer as many as she possibly can before the end. That said, if you do want to interact with her, there's no problem. If you've got the raise the hand function, please do raise your hand. Otherwise, put in the chat that you'd like to ask a question, and we'll get you on to ask a question. You can unmute yourself and speak to Alexis directly. Don't worry if we don't get to your question, then Alexis is going to try and sort through the questions after the end of the webinar, if that's possible. The webinar is going to be recorded so that other colleagues can watch it afterwards. If you feel uncomfortable with this, please do feel free to turn your camera off. We certainly won't be picking on anyone during the session. So don't worry, and the questions and answers at the end won't be recorded, and your questions are anonymized anyway, so please do feel free to put your questions in there if you have one. Now finally, this wouldn't be a webinar without some IT gremlins. It always happens to us, even with our best of intentions, something always crops up, so please be patient with the IT. Sometimes you will find that it's easier to rejoin, leave and rejoin if need be, if your screen freezes, and likewise if we have any IT issues, please do bear with us and we will try and fix them as we go along, but fingers crossed it's all going to go smoothly. You are going to enjoy it, and hopefully you get to take a lot from the session today. So Alexis, I'll hand over to you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Neil. Morning, everybody. Hope you're all okay and ready for your week. I'm really excited to be here and to be talking to you about the masks we wear. So I'm going to share my screen just so that you can see my presentation as we go along. As Neil says, if there's any questions or any comments you want to make, anything at all, please put them in the chat, because whatever you put in the chat, somebody else will be reading and might help them as well. So I don't have all the answers, none of us do. But if you've got anything that you think really works for you or something that you want to comment on, then please do. I really appreciate that interaction. And if you do want to keep your camera on, that's great too, because that means I can see people's faces. You know, if we're doing this for real, I'd be able to see you all sat in an audience. You never know, one day we might be able to go back to that. So I'm Alexis, I'm the Managing Director at Fortis, as Neil said. I'm a psychotherapist, systemic practitioner, coach, trainer, mediator, supervisor, speaker, everything that really is to do with people. I'm fascinated by people and always have been. And have done quite a bit of work within policing, delivering training, doing mediations, providing therapy, and at Fortis we provide therapy to officers and staff as well. So this idea for doing this webinar really has come from all of those conversations and all the things we've learned as we've been doing that work. I've done a TEDx which is called Why Hide the Repair. If you just put my name in and Google it, that'll come up. It's about 16 minutes, so it's not too long, and gives you a bit of an idea of our approach around mental health and where Fortis comes from as well, really. I'm also the host for the Keeping the Peace podcast. We put out an episode to support the last webinar that I did last month, the Duty of Self-Care, with Mark Mottershed from Lancashire. And we put out one with DCI Pete from Humberside to support this webinar. We just thought it might be helpful to kind of hear a conversation about some of these aspects. You can listen to it anytime, anywhere. It's on all the major platforms. If you search for it, you're probably best to search for Oscar Kilo because it'll come up then. But yeah, I'll kind of plug that again at the end just to kind of, I'm going to talk a bit about the conversation I had with Pete Thorpe as well during the webinar. So at Fortis, we provide a massive range of different services. It's developed over the years. I would say that we've evolved, but actually I think we've just expanded really in terms of different services and just ways of being able to use what we know and what we're learning all the time to be able to support people the best way possible. We have got a website and there is loads of free content on there. So if you are, a contact for your force and, put out information about stress, mental health, about loss, about anything to do with what's happened over the past year as well, there's lots of tips on there. Feel free to, download them and use them. There's lots of strategies and ideas that you can use. So, please, that's, we'd love it if you use that. We've also got Facebook groups, which I just wanted to flag because these are also available to anybody. So we have our main Facebook page, which we do self-care sessions, which are Facebook Lives every Thursday. There's a couple left. We're going to do them to the end of March. We've done them for 3 months, myself and Joe from Fortis, and these are conversations with different people about what helps them with their self-care and what they've learned, and they can be really helpful just to normalise the conversation, and they're all on there so you can have a look at the historic ones. We've also got the F Word, which is a Facebook group open to anybody, and that's a community again where we share ideas and we encourage people within that community as well, and linked to that are network events and newsletters that we put out. So we're trying to kind of get as much information out as we possibly can to help as many as possible. And then we have the Westerly Club, and the Westerly Club is for men only, and it's about men's mental health and accessing support. And the idea behind the Westerly is it's a fishing term. I'm from Grimsby, so it seemed appropriate. Your Westerly is your best mate, really. It's just the person you lean on, the person who helps you. It's a bit like your west wind. So if you'd had a bad fishing trip, there would be the person who'd buy you a pint and check in with you and make sure you're okay. And that's what that group is about. And the guys in there blow me away every day with how supportive they are for each other. So, if you're a guy over the age of 16 or somebody who would benefit, then please tell them to, to ask to join. And then, all the other usual platforms. So I just wanted to let you know that those things are there. You don't have to introduce yourself in them. You don't have to engage if you don't want to, but if you just want to kind of be in the background, that's absolutely fine. So today we're going to be talking about the masks that we wear, and the way that I'm going to kind of approach that is to think about how we present ourselves in terms of ourself and also what we might see in others and how we present ourselves to others as well. We're going to explore the persona and the shadow, which is very much around a Jungian way of working. So Carl Jung, who was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, and he actually founded analytical psychology. So I'm not going to go into massive amounts of depth with that because we would literally be here for days, but I'm going to take out some of the parts of his thoughts that might be relevant and useful to you. And we see and we use in ways that we support people as well. So we're also going to think about the filter and what we do with our responses, and how we might perceive others and how that might get in the way as well, and what is happening when those difficulties can occur. We're going to think a bit about how you might want to manage your mask, and I'm going to use different types of theory, not just from Jungian perspective, but different types of theory that just for me really kind of demonstrate some really kind of simple ideas that you can maybe go away and have a go at and reflect on and think about. Thank you to those people who got in touch with me after the last webinar who told me some of the things that had resonated and what they wanted to use and think about. It was really helpful to know that. And so again, with this one, if you go away and you have some light bulb moments or there's some things that you've kind of been reflecting on, then let me know, because that would be great. So all of this, everything we're doing and everything we do at Fortis really, and what's happening this week at Oscar Kilo is all around emotional intelligence and increasing our emotional intelligence. So understanding and being aware of ourselves and being able to control ourselves, express our emotion, and also to be able to handle those relationships around us. Making good, sensible decisions, good judgments, but also being empathic. So when we think about empathy, it's very different to feeling sympathetic. Sympathy is about, feeling sorry for someone, which obviously we all have that capacity to do that. But actually, in terms of our emotional intelligence, thinking about our empathy and, are we able to walk in someone else's shoes? Are we able to think about their context and what makes them, feel the way they feel or behave the way they behave? And when we talk about presentation, as I said in that slide about what we're going to cover in the next hour, I'm thinking about what we see. So you will be doing this all the time in your roles. You'll be looking at how do people present, what do they look like? How are they responding to others? How are they responding to you? You'll be thinking about how you respond to other people as well. What are non-verbals like? What does that tell you about somebody? How do people recount their experiences? So if you're taking statements off people, they'll all have slightly different, ways of recounting what's happened. There might be quite big differences in how they recount what's happened, but they will have their perception. Where does the really kind of heavy things like blame and doubt and shame, where do they sit for you, but also where do they sit for that other person? So when we're thinking about presentation, does that seep out at times? Is it kind of shown in different types of behaviour? And what's happening for each person and how are others responding and reacting to them? So if I'm assessing someone on my presentation from a mental health perspective, that can tell me an awful lot. Somebody interacting with someone else, somebody's account of how they are responded to by other people, all of that tells me an awful lot about that person and how they might be seen by others, how I might be perceiving them as well. And also think about, what isn't said, what is the unsaid? There's a lot that can seep out in lots of ways, behaviourally and emotionally, but there might be an awful lot of things that aren't being said. And often when I get, asked to do mediations, especially, there's an awful lot that's gone under the surface that's not been said or that's been assumed or presumed by people. So, considering what has been unsaid and what could that be? Is it even in the awareness of the people or of yourself? And also, what is our internal response? So if I'm working with someone, I'm tracking, how am I feeling about this person? What am I feeling about what they're saying? Can I be really congruent and honest about my response to what they're saying? And how do I put that across in a way that can be received? So there's an awful lot when we're thinking about presentation, how we present to each other and how we respond and react to each other tells us an awful lot about what's going on internally for ourselves, but also maybe we can start to understand other people in a slightly different way, which we'll talk a bit more about later. So part of our masks and part of how we present is also about our roles. So, how do you manage your life and how many different roles do you have? So if you quickly did a grid, and if we were sat in a room together, we would be doing this as an exercise and just wrote down how many different roles do you actually have in life. I did this yesterday. I haven't done it for a while. And I did this yesterday and I could literally fill that grid. And that's how many boxes I managed to fill in terms of the number of different roles I've got. So if you consider how many different roles you have, so it might be professionally, it might be personally, it could be in your relationships, it could be communities you're a part of, it could be within your family, it goes on and on and on. If you consider how many different roles you have, how do you present in each of those different roles? What do you show of yourself in each of those different roles? It's quite interesting to think about which parts of your personality you take to them and which parts you don't as well. If you color coded those different boxes in terms of, maybe how connected you feel to other people, how you present, which bits of you feel, how authentic you feel when you're in those roles, it'd be interesting again to reflect on, which bits of me do I keep hidden and what do I hold back? So anything you can think around, the roles that you have, but also how your personality evolves and develops and changes depending on the relationships you're in and what your role is within that community is interesting to consider. Sometimes we don't really recognise how much we are holding in terms of those different roles and responsibilities, but also how do we present? How would people perceive us in those roles? And are we being our authentic selves, or are we having to feel that we need to protect ourselves? You know, are we feeling that we can trust others? All of that impacts on how we come across. Now, I wanted to kind of show you and share this with you, because I think it's a really helpful model. And some of you may have seen this before and some of you may not, but it's called the Jabari Window. And it was developed by a guy called Joseph Luft and Harry Ingham in 1955. Joseph, Harry. It's a very inventive way of coming up with a model. And they drew this model all that time ago to think about self-awareness, our personal development, and also how we communicate. So our interpersonal relationships, considering our behavior in group dynamics, and also you can apply it to things like team development, you know, and how teams respond to each other. So I'm going to go through it just to explain each of those areas, because it really makes sense when you kind of understand what that looks like. It looks a bit complicated on there, but if you look at these 4 boxes, that's your whole window, okay? Now, this represents you as a whole person, and the number 1 there, the open and free area, this is the information about our attitudes, our behaviours, our emotions and feelings, our skills and our views. And it's what is known by ourselves, so what we're aware of, but also what is known by others as well. And we're okay with other people knowing that. There's no sense of us needing to hide anything. You know, that area is open and it's free. And it will mean that we can communicate quite well when we're in this. So the larger that area becomes, the more effective we become, because we're able to communicate and we're not hiding. We might want to improve that area. So if you're going to draw this for yourself, if you've got pen and paper in front of you, just kind of sketch it out, put those 4 boxes in as equals, and then just dot the lines as to where you might feel that you are right now. If we want to expand that area, you'll see there it says feedback solicitation on the, as you're looking at it on the right hand side, and also self-disclosure and exposure at the bottom. If we want to expand that, we need to hear what the people think and feel about us and what's their feedback. And we also want to maybe share more of ourselves. You know, if you're going into a new role, you might kind of not do that initially because you're not sure you can trust people. You don't know quite, you know, what the relationships are going to be like. And then that unknown area there, it talks about shared discovery. Again, you would expand out into there. So that might be self-reflection, doing webinars and things like this today, listening to things that help you, reading, therapy, coaching, all of those things help you to kind of tap into that unknown area. Okay, so the unknown area is unknown by you, but also unknown by others. So we've got the open area there, which is known by self and known by others. We've got the unknown area, which for me is quite exciting. I think that's like the untapped potential. So, you know, what bits of myself I not know, and how can I learn about those? And I have therapy when I need to. I have supervision, you know, every month to try and explore and expand on that. The blind area. Now, this part is the part where we ask for feedback. So, you know, we aren't aware of it, but others will be. So if I give you an example of that, years ago, I worked for Marks and Spencer's, and I went into Marks's as somebody who worked in a family business. I was quite direct at the time. I hadn't really softened up around the edges yet. And I was trying to do things for what I thought were the right reasons, but actually how I was coming across to people, they were seeing me as being, you know, quite icy, really. There was no emotion. I was just very direct. For me, we had to get the job done. When they gave me that feedback, which one of them was brave enough to do, it meant that I could understand how I was coming across and soften my approach and really think about that. Now, that was years and years ago, and I still remember that feedback because it was a blind area, a blind spot for me. I wasn't aware. So as long as you can take that feedback on board and not be defensive, then obviously that's going to help your development. And that's why we do exercises like psychometric testing. It's why we do, you know, 360 feedback. You know, all of those things help us to understand ourselves a little bit more. So if we go then on to thinking about the hidden area, Now, this hidden area is also called a facade as well. So this will be information that's known to you, but you want to keep it from others. So, you know, there might be parts of self that you maybe don't like, or that you want to kind of keep hidden because it feels safer to do this. It might be your personal information. It could be your past experiences. It could be feelings, fears, secrets. And we keep it hidden from other people because we want to keep that private. And the problem is that if we keep that at the same size as that original kind of diagram, as that equal quarter, it can really prevent us from actually growing and moving into development. Because sometimes we feel that things that we might feel we need to be worried about something, we might be fearful, we might be ashamed, might be all sorts of different emotions. But actually, the more we can accept that about ourselves, the more we can understand ourselves and that emotional intelligence bit we were talking about before, the better that's going to be for us. And there's a less need to keep hiding who we are and how we feel about things. So again, you might kind of do this exercise and think, you know, actually I've done loads of development over the past, I don't know, say year or something like that. And I can see that it's different to where my window is different to where it was before. So opening your Jabari window, opening that free area and being more accepting of yourself, but also being more open with others can be massively helpful. That's not to say that I understand too that there's times when you want to protect yourself, because, you know, we've all been there. We've all had those relationships or dynamics or team dynamics that can affect us in that way. So the unknown areas, as I mentioned earlier, is around, you know, tapping into some of that unknown about ourselves. You know, what we might be feeling, our capabilities, what we're talented at. You know, we might keep some of that untapped potential due to traumatic experiences in the past. There might be things that have happened that we may not even be aware of, may not even be able to remember. But it's quite an exciting place when we look at it from a therapeutic perspective, because actually the more we know, the more aware we are, the more open we can be, and the less frightened we feel about keeping that part of us hidden. If anybody wants this, I can send you this image on this slide, you know, on email. So just put in the chat if you'd like it, because I'm happy to share it, and I can put the description with it as well. So another layer on top of that. So we've got the Jabari window, and we've got kind of thinking about what do I show and what do I keep hidden, which is very much about what masks are about. We've also got conditions of worth. And I mentioned this in the first webinar that we did. And I wanted to be a bit more specific about it. So our conditioning comes from the way we need to behave in order to get approval from others. So this is our significant others growing up. So what we want to do is get approval from people around us and experience that feedback. So there will be ways that we behave and almost messages that we've created growing up that mean that we will keep doing those things in order to get a response from people. And that response helps us with our self-worth. So we want to get their approval. The difficulty is, as we get older, maybe how we've been conditioned to do that, or how we've chosen to do that growing up, may be something that doesn't fit for us as an adult. And it becomes our introjected messages, our introjected values. So we internalize how we behave in order to get the expectations from others. So, you know, that might be about approval. It might be about not wanting to be rejected. You know, there can be all sorts of, it's very personal. It's very much about what we've grown up in and, you know, what we're looking to get from other people. So I know that one of mine, which we'll talk a bit more about in a minute in terms of value, is about working hard. You know, I grew up in a family business. If someone didn't turn up, you just did the double shift, you know, you just worked hard. And so I've had to unpick that. I still work hard, but I've also got to unpick how I also have enough self-worth to be able to stop working and to take time out and look after myself, and also ask for help. And all of those things that I was really conditioned not to do by my upbringing. Even though my parents would say that that wasn't messages they gave me, that was how I internalized it. So thinking about your messages that you have and how that impacts on you is really important. And it can really clash with your world views, which is why sometimes we feel conflicted, we maybe feel compromised, and that can lead us to feeling unhappy, being, depressed, or our mood can be low and anxious, because we don't want to not get that approval from significant others in the main. Some people don't care, I appreciate that, but in the main, that's how we work. A guy called Eric Byrne also came up with this idea, which is that we have a script. So we grow up with our conditioning, with what happens around us, and we might act out that repeatedly in our relationships. We might act it out at work, we might act it out in teams, we might act it out in our family. And that script is kind of, if you think about it, it's a bit like having, the villains and the heroes and the plot twists and everything else. It's what we've grown to expect. So you might have things in your life where you think, I don't know why that keeps happening in my relationships, or I get to a certain point at work and I keep getting kind of stuck, or I don't go any further. And it might be that it's because of how you are scripted to see your life and how you feel you are in your role in your life. So going back to those ideas about all your different roles, how are you behaving in each of those roles? And, do you come across similar wins, and do you come across similar difficulties in each of those areas? You might see this if you've worked in things like domestic abuse, where the relationship might be different people, but the same pattern keeps happening. That can be very much linked to this as well. And it can mean that we feel quite incongruent. So congruence is about feeling genuine and being genuine and authentic. And incongruent is obviously the exact opposite to that. So we might feel like, actually, how my life is rolling out in front of me, how this script keeps happening, really doesn't fit with me and how I feel and how I want to feel and how I want to manage my life. And that's where reflection, self-research is really important, because you can make those changes. That's what therapy is about making changes and making choices that, maybe didn't even know they were there to make, but it can really help with life and quality of life and self-worth as well. So if we kind of think about that script and we think about those values, that conditioning, this is how this kind of manifests itself. So if I am to be of value, I must. And if you look down that list, those are just some ideas I've come up with in terms of work I've done with officers and staff in training and in therapy that might resonate. But this is about, fundamentally, if I'm going to be valuable, this is what I must do. Now, the word must doesn't really give you much room for maneuver. It's right up there with should. I must do this, or I must do that. If you look down that list, you might see, actually, there's a couple of those that really fit for me, that I kind of consider that in order for me to be of value, I must do each of these things. So I must, say, for example, be perfect. And be perfect is a massive driver. It can be quite a strong conditioning for people. And you can literally drive yourself into the ground trying to be perfect. And the be perfect is based on what somebody else's perception is of you. I want to kind of meet that need. I want to get their approval. So I'll be as perfect as I can. That's why it's so devastating when you don't get that person's approval, or you feel rejected, because I've done it as perfectly as possible. You might have one around not asking for help. That might be something that, I see that sometimes with officers and staff when we're working with them, that actually asking for help has been the actual last thing that they got to. It's actually, I've got to. They've got no choice to, because actually I'm supposed to know what to do. I'm supposed to know how to help. I'm the person who does the helping. So reflecting on your own conditions of worth, your own introjected messages, can be really helpful to think about, is that something that I still want to have? Or is it something that I would like to change and be maybe a bit kinder to myself, And that's something that came out in the podcast with Pete Thorpe around masks, was actually, this is being a little bit more kind and a bit more nurturing to yourself can be really helpful in just feeling that you're not your own worst critic, because that's how this kind of starts to manifest itself. The other thing I wanted to just mention really is around boundaries, because in the first webinar that we did, when I said about saying no, there was a flurry of activity in the chat about how people found that really hard. And obviously, in your roles, you are there to follow orders and, you're there to serve the public, and there's these very obviously strong messages about what you need to be doing, and saying no can feel like actually that's impossible in my role. But I think I wanted to say a bit more about it and expand on it a little bit from a boundaries perspective. So, if we go back to thinking about our conditioning, and if saying no is something that we really struggle with, it could be that growing up, we were asked to help others, but not asked to help we were never really allowed to help ourselves, as an example. So if you're kind of brought up in a family where you help someone else, but you don't put yourself first, then actually saying no is really hard, because that goes against, it can be quite a frightening thing to do, because it goes against what we've been brought up in order to feel acceptable and to be approved of. So considering your boundaries and thinking about where you are in them, I think can be massively helpful, because you can reflect on, actually, there are certain times when you might be quite assertive with your boundaries and you feel okay with that. But there might be other times when you're more unclear, where you might be more passive. You might not ask for what you need. You might not even be sure about, what you like, what matters to you. You're not clear about you underneath all of that. And I know this is something that when I'm working with people, when we think about what they actually like and what's really important to them and what's important in terms of their values, sometimes that can be actually really tough to figure out, because it can be we can often base our values and what's important to us on what other people have told us or have conditioned us to feel is valuable and what they feel is important to them. So I've tried to do this as kind of a bit of a spectrum. So, if we're looking at our boundaries being very rigid, that can be very much about not wanting to trust people, not feeling we can trust, but also might be an element of, I don't want to get found out. So if you stick rigidly to your boundaries, and it's very clear that you're not going to move from them ever, then that's going to be really difficult. So you might think about your team and think, actually, if someone is really rigid with their boundaries, that doesn't help us as a team. But what's going on for them? Why do they feel the need to be rigid around those boundaries? Is there some insecurity? Is there some uncertainty? Why do they feel closed off? All of those kinds of things. And what we want to be doing is recognizing where we are on this spectrum and thinking, actually, I'm being healthy with my boundaries. Something that I've seen with officers is that might be quite clear about boundaries in work, but be really unclear outside of work, and be quite passive. And those healthy boundaries that actually, that they have when they're in work, when they know what is expected and they know what the role means to them and they know what the uniform means and everything else, is quite difficult when it's just you as a person, just without any of those kind of structures and boundaries already in place. So considering those roles we've talked about, considering where are my boundaries within them, what parts of my personality do I show or do I not show, is quite interesting to reflect on, because you might want to make some changes there. You might want to think, actually, why do I not do it there, but I do it there? How is that easier for me? So when we're thinking about the masks that we wear, there's a stand there, you'll see the image there. All of those masks have been done by either clients who gave us permission to use them or members of the general public. So we use masks in therapy because sometimes being creative can be massively helpful to communicate what's going on. And we use them with all ages. So this isn't about children, this is about adults and young people, and we've done them with anyone. They can run, but they can't hide. It's quite an effective therapeutic tool. But what we did was, a couple of years ago, we asked the general public to help us. We wanted to show and demonstrate how individual mental health is for each of us, and how individual our emotions are for each of us. And we thought we'd get about 40 people who would respond, 40, 50 people. So that's how many masks we bought. And we had far more than that. A good 250, 300 people got in touch because they wanted to have a mask and express themselves and decorate it to show that. So we had some amazing ones that were sent back in where people have spent hours on expressing themselves. And so we were able to make this display to be able to demonstrate, actually, each of us is different. Each of us has our own interpretation, our own difficulties, our own experiences. And we all also have certain amount of things that we keep on the inside that we maybe hide from others, we don't want to share. Now, that might be because we want to portray ourselves in a particular way on the outside, and on the inside we might feel a mix of emotions. But one of the things that really came out was not wanting to be seen to be weak and not wanting to be seen to be vulnerable or emotional. We've done this with police officers, we've done this with whole families, adult families who sat together around the table and did these together to talk about their experiences and what they felt. So they're quite a powerful tool, and we were incredibly grateful that people took that chance to do that. If we apply it to the iceberg metaphor, which we all love an iceberg, the part that is on the outside of the mask is what we're showing in terms of our conscious mind. So, you know, what we maybe choose to show when we're feeling in control. We might not choose to show things if we're not feeling in control, but from a conscious mind, it's what we choose to put out there. So we might have particular ways of wanting to communicate, show our values, behave, you know, all of those things are, and our conscious mind contains all of those thoughts and feelings and you know, any given moment. And we can process them and think and talk about them quite rationally when we're using that conscious mind. But if we think about the pre-conscious, so this is a Freudian idea, so we've got to love a bit of Freud. If you put that just under that surface there, those are the things in therapy we talk about being on the edge of our awareness. So they're around, they're kind of looking to attract the eye of the conscious mind to kind of come forward. But that's where we would kind of think there's something on the edge of awareness that would suddenly come into the conscious mind. And those are those kind of light bulb moments when we think, oh God, why have I never seen that like that? Why have I never thought about it in that way? Or suddenly we feel differently because we've had that realization. So we have the pre-conscious, which is just under the surface there. And then we've got the unconscious mind, or the subconscious, whichever way you want to call it. As you can see, that's a vast majority of what makes us tick. You know, it's all of our kind of reservoir, if you like, of feelings and thoughts, all our urges, our memories that are outside of our conscious awareness. Now, most of the contents of the unconscious are usually something that we feel is unacceptable or unpleasant. And it can lead to feelings like, you know, feeling conflicted, feeling compromised, feeling anxious, feeling in pain. And it's probably something that when it moves into the pre-conscious, if it can, then those are the things that might impact on us without us really realizing it, you know, in the conscious, not without realizing it, but it might impact us on a conscious mind. We might start to show behaviors and think, why am I behaving in this way? What is that linked to? And why is this person triggering me? Or why is the situation triggering me? But as you can see from the iceberg, there's an awful lot going on behind. And then you've got the conscious mind on the top there, the bit that we've decided is the safe bit, the bit that we can show people. And the also part of the unconscious mind is that we, you know, all our involuntary movements, so breathing, our blinking, you know, all those things that we don't even think about are subconsciously happening. And also our sleep patterns. So if we have things going on that are under the surface, quite often our sleep will be affected. You know, we might dream. We might have quite a vivid imagination around things that, you know, come to the surface and start to be processed during our sleep. So it has quite an impact on us. And if we're thinking about this as a mask, what we show on the outside is the conscious stuff, and then the bit behind is the pre-conscious and the unconscious. And the part of the mask that I love, the bit that I find really helpful thinking about it using a mask rather than using the iceberg, is that our persona is what we show on our outward face. So, you know, if you think about your uniform, if you wear a uniform, or your role, your position, these things might be part of your mask. They might be, you know, quite integral to how you present yourself and what you feel is important in your role, and, you know, how you might be at work. It might be different to how you are at home, but your persona at work may be part of this. And I've seen it where uniformed officers who, you know, put their uniform on in the morning and kind of go, right, okay, this is what I am today. But actually at home might be struggling to, you know, empty the dishwasher, or, you know, just really simple stuff that actually struggling at home, but find that at work, I know who I am at work and I know what I need to present. The shadow, which is all that stuff under the surface, the bit behind the mask, this is all the stuff that we might consider it to be negative. It's usually stuff that's repressed, that therefore is maybe unknown. So that going back to that unconscious or subconscious stuff. And if you imagine that your mask, the bit that you kind of have on in front of you, is your filter. You're filtering all the time. What do I need to show? What do I not need to show? How do I manage that situation? You might be triggered by something. You might feel angry. You might feel fearful, or you might feel ashamed. And you might not be able to filter that in the moment. You know, that might be something which kind of spills out. But there might be other times where you step away and give yourself a chance to reflect and think, and actually then come at it from a different perspective. But there's all this stuff going on behind the surface. And we saw that when we did the mask exercise with the community, that people were just holding such a lot of emotion and such a lot of experiences and a lot of shame and fear that they weren't expressing, and were actually feeling quite low and anxious as a result of that. So the reason we use creativity to communicate that is that sometimes the language can be quite limiting in expressing how we feel. So, you know, when I turn up to a training, Keeping the Peace training for a load of police officers and staff, and, you know, I put out colouring pens and pencils, and, you know, the looks that I receive are all a bit like, what is she up to? But I want to kind of come away from that cognitive conscious stuff, and I want to get to some of this stuff safely. I don't want to make anyone feel vulnerable with their colleagues, but safely to kind of express things in a different way. So, you know, choosing colours, choosing patterns, being able to think about what this expression represents for this person. So we didn't do mask exercises in the training because I didn't want to leave people feeling vulnerable, and I wanted to be able to help people to reflect and be able to process those on an individual basis if that's what they wanted to do. But what we did do was talk about masks and talk about the shadow and the persona, to be able to maybe give a different language to sometimes how we might be feeling and what we might be either expressing or holding back. And so when I asked DCI Pete Thorpe to help me with this, I asked him if he would fill out, if he would decorate a mask. And I didn't give him any direction. I just asked him to, you know, just to take what we'd done in the training, because he's been in the training. He was the lead who was with me for all the training that we delivered for the PVP team at Humberside, and just kind of express himself using colours or patterns or whatever he wanted to do. So I'm going to show you a few examples. I'm just going to talk through this one. So please do listen to the podcast, because it's really interesting to hear how he approached this. But he was really, he really wanted the colours to be important and to represent him in the best way that he could, you know, express himself in the best way he could. And what was interesting was he's actually colourblind. So he had to research the colours, and then he had to buy pencils that actually had the colours written on, so that he could make sure it was accurate in how he wanted to communicate. So the blue that you can see there on the front of the mask, which is mirrored on the inside of the mask, you know, for him was about reliability, about being trustworthy. You know, he's as a leader role, he wanted his team to feel that, you know, he had loyalty, and there was honour, and that he was, you know, there was that stability that he was offering people. And it was very much linked to, you know, how he feels on the inside to what he wanted to show on the outside. The red, the compartmentalized aspect was quite interesting, but the red side of it was about strength and energy and boldness and passion. And the yellow on the other side of the forehead was about being positive and optimistic and, you know, lively and upbeat. And then the orange side, which was representative of creativity and enthusiasm, you know, trying ideas, seeing if it works, if it doesn't, you know, learning from it, having a go at things. And he took very seriously his role and how he wanted to kind of present that in a very clear way that would support the people who work with him, and keep in mind the staff that are in the team, but also the victims and the public as well. On the inside, I was really he really kind of risked putting in there about how he felt with that violet, that middle streak there is violet, just so you know. And that part representing worry and, you know, double guessing and, you know, kind of overthinking and not being sure. And, you know, so actually what he has learned to do over the years is recognize those feelings are there, but also come back to that blue section there about his values, and the brown section, which was about stability and grounding, and he described it as dull. That part is also next to the blue. So that kind of very much about a foundation that he felt represented himself, and being genuine and really solid. And then the streak of black that you can see there on the left edge is that kind of tipping into darker thoughts and tipping into depression. And, you know, actually he talks about how he manages those thoughts and how he brings himself back into a more rational way of thinking. And those boxes on the right-hand side, which he reliably informs me are grey, they represent those boxes that we hear a lot about in therapy. You know, what's in the boxes? How many boxes have you got in that warehouse in your brain? Sometimes we hear about people having lots of them, and on one massive one, and the lids are coming off, or there's behaviours, kind of feelings and emotions coming out. And he was talking about how, you know, something, for example, like child postmortems is in one of those boxes, and you know, those things that have impacted on him, but also that there's less there than there used to be. So he deliberately didn't decorate the rest of the mask on the inside there, because actually he wanted to represent what goes on above the eyes and what happens in the mind. And expressing it in this way was quite liberating, even though it was quite hard. And I think putting it out on a public podcast is incredibly brave, because this is about talking about our inner workings. Now, if we'd been in a therapy session which wasn't being recorded, we would have explored some of those things in more depth. But we wanted to show how this can be used and how helpful it can be, but also how hard it is as well, to be really honest about some of that stuff and the shadow that might be in the back there, and those worries, am I good enough, you know, and, you know, kind of feeling anxious, and how you then filter that and present it, or how he filters that and presents that on the front. I wanted to share a couple of others with you as well. So this one is by a lady who was in her mid-20s. And when I asked her if she would decorate this mask, she did the front. So it says on there, storms make trees take deeper roots, which is a Dolly Parton quote. And you'll see the tree there, and there's lots of roots, and there's the storm on the left-hand side as you're looking at it. And she hadn't decorated the inside. And when I went back to her and said, would you mind just decorating the inside, so that we've kind of got the balance of the shadow and those emotions internally and what you show on the outside. And then she did that inside there, which is obviously incredibly dramatic, incredibly dark, lots of, you know, lightning, thoughts and worries and feelings, some stars in there as well, but very black, very contrasted to the front of the mask, which I think, you know, is a very personal story about how this lady filters what she shows on the outside and what is really going on at times on the inside. And then this one, which was about, you know, presenting a you know, kind of happy, sunny, lovely day on the outside, but actually what's going on internally, which was, you know, feeling quite sad and frightened and, you know, unsure and uncertain. So if you imagine those last two masks, that you've got someone in your, you know, one of your colleagues who feels this way, you know, how are they presenting and how are they behaving, and what's going on for them? And, you know, who knows about that? If we're considering the shadow, it's a lot of our hidden aspects of our personality that we want to push to one side. There might be things that we think are unacceptable, you know, like I talked about, you know, asking for help or not working hard, you know, or not working the hours or whatever it might be. Not doing that's taken a process of reflection and making different decisions about it. You know, we might have quite a lot of deep emotions that we keep behind the mask. And a lot of these might be formed during our development, and unmet needs as we were growing up and as we've got older. But it also might be some positive things that have come from that. So, for example, you know, you might have learned to be more assertive due to childhood experiences. But what we do know is that those behaviours can sometimes seep out. So, you know, if someone's behaviour starts to change, if their presentation is different, if your presentation becomes different, quite often somebody else will see it before we see it. And that's quite helpful if you've got a good support network around you, if they can say, is everything okay? But the other thing we tend to do is project some of what we feel about ourselves onto other people. So sometimes our perception of others So this is complicated. So our perception of others' perception of us can be incorrect. So we might feel that we know what they think about us or how they feel about us. We might be quite angry with someone who maybe puts in better boundaries than us, or, you know, isn't available to work at the drop of a hat or whatever. But actually, sometimes that's because we're projecting our own feelings about ourselves onto other people. And that's where sometimes giving yourself a bit of space before you respond or react to something can be really helpful. It can be often very little evidence for what we feel is happening in a relationship, and we might be misreading the situation because we're projecting how we feel about ourselves onto somebody else. So being conscious of that and recognizing, actually, this is something that's about me, not them. And if you can, excuse me, bring that into your awareness and work on that, and that's going to help you to feel more at ease with yourself. You're going to be less hidden, going back to that Jabari window. And that's the kind of trick with this, is being able to admit some of these things to ourselves and being able to actually work with them, and then being able to not feel quite so fearful of expressing how we feel and worried about someone not approving of us. So just in terms of our self-reflection, learning about ourselves can be really scary. You might want to avoid it. Something that Pete and I laugh about in the podcast is that we'd planned to do this a long time ago, this podcast, and we both avoided it because we knew it was going to be something that's going to be more personal. So, you know, that was just interesting in terms of how we usually would work together. You know, if you understand yourself, you're going to be more aware of your triggers, what you're driven by, and taking time out to reflect can be difficult, but really necessary. And the more we know ourselves, and the more we understand our personas and what masks we put on and what's going on in our shadow, the better our understanding is of how we behave and react to others. So, you know, actually, if we can understand that, then we can be more authentic in ourselves, and we can, you know, not be quite so hard on ourselves, and not maybe looking for approval in quite the same way as we maybe have done. So if you know, wanted to do a mask or something along those lines, express it creatively, you know, what would it look like? How would you approach it? You know, yours will be very individual. It'll be different to anybody else's. You might approach it in a completely different way to the ones I've shown you, which is completely fine. There's no rules, which can be a bit scary if you're not used to working creatively. But there might be, you know, something that you might maybe want to do. You might want to do it with family members, or, you know, if you've got a really great team, you might want to do it with them. But again, it's about being careful, just about how people might feel vulnerable as a result of that. So in terms of reflections, and we'll come to questions for a few minutes. As I said, if you'd like the Jabari window, then let me know, because I'm happy to send it out to you, and I'll put some stuff in there for you to think about. And, you know, the idea around the masks, consider your personas, think about how you behave in different roles that you're in and different groups that you might be connected to. Consider your shadow, you know, what happens with your shadow. And also, you know, do some research, you know, read, listen to audiobooks, watch YouTube videos, listen to podcasts, listen to Keeping the Peace podcast, anything that's going to help you to be able to reflect on yourself. You know, it's that unknown bit in the Jabari window. You know, there's always stuff to know. There's always stuff to learn. You're never done, which some people might think, oh, it's just so annoying. But for others, that might be quite a nice feeling. You know, journal things, voice record how you're feeling and what reflections you've had. And very much ask for support if you need it. You can't do these things always on your own. And I know I haven't been able to do them on my own. I've had lots of support over the years to think about myself and think about, you know, how I present and what I do and what I don't do, and how I feel when I'm triggered and all of those things. So I wanted to put a couple of ideas for further reading. There's the Chimp Paradox, which I know we mentioned last time, which is really accessible. And there's also a children's version of that now as well. There's an inner work book written by Robert Johnson, which is in relation to the dreams and ideas that might be going on with the subconscious and how that might come out during sleep. And there's a couple of TED Talks I wanted to just mention. There's Dr. Stephen Mortensen, who talks about projecting your personal shadow. It's really accessible and really interesting. And also Brené Brown, who's a psychotherapist like me, and she's got loads of TED Talks out there and podcasts and all sorts of things. Now, you know, you might not like her style, or you might... But listen to some of it, because at least it'll give you some other things to think about and apply to yourself. And then obviously the Keeping the Peace podcast, which I'm just going to mention again. Okay, so should we just come to any questions that anybody wants to ask? I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, there's a few things in the chat.
Yeah, we have got a few things in the chat, but they're generally a quiet bunch in relation to questions. I'll give you a thought, well, just in case we're going to get any in the next few minutes. Just something I was kind of reflecting on is that the masks almost give you a kind of superpower, in as much as you can suddenly go to work, you know, certainly in the role that we do, and you can make hundreds of different decisions and you can take on so much work, but then you go home and you can't actually make a decision about what you're having for your tea or whatever it is, you know. And I think that's a, you know, really good way of, you know, demonstrating the difference between the two. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think part as well is that if your role is that, you know, you're having to make decisions all the time, and you look to for that as well, obviously, in probably every role in policing has that element to it, that sometimes it's nice to kind of hand that over to somebody else as well. And it's okay to do that, you know. I very much do that at home. You know, I make all the decisions at work, and then I go home and I don't care what we do for tea. I don't mind what we do on Saturday. It's fine. And you might have different masks for different things. That's the other thing I meant to say, was that you might have, you know, if you were decorating 10 of them for different roles you're in, they might all be quite different on the outside anyway. So how you filter is, you know, it's a choice, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I think one of the other things as well, going back to the Jabari window, is that certainly in the police, we haven't been good historically at giving feedback. So people are really reluctant to actually ask for that feedback because they don't know what's going to come, and, you know, bits of criticism. Yeah, it's potentially quite a nerve-wracking thing to ask for, isn't it? Because you've got to trust the people who are giving you the feedback. One of the things that Pete talks about in the podcast is he wondered that if he asked others to decorate a mask, you know, the outside of the mask for what they see from him, would they interpret it in the same way? And I thought it's quite interesting. It's also quite risky to ask somebody else to do that. But a great idea when you think about that 360 feedback, that, you know, I've been through that process myself, and everyone I know anyways, I've always kind of crossed the fingers and hope for the best that they're going to get something, you know, that's going to not be too harsh. But you're right. Sometimes we can feel like we've got to not ask for feedback for fear of what it might be. Just because someone gives you feedback doesn't mean to say it's completely accurate. It's their perception. So you can take from that what you need. And sometimes when we hold on to the stuff that we think isn't fair, that's what the shadow is based on. It's like, well, I don't agree with that, and it's not fair, and I'm going to feel wounded about that. But actually, you know, not everyone's going to like what they see, and not everyone's going to like what you do. So it's okay to accept that feedback for what it is, but also maybe take on the parts that you feel are really relevant to you, that you want to do something about. That's great. Well, Alexis, we've just about run out of time. But thanks very much for doing this for us today. It's been really, really interesting. If anyone has any questions they want to ask, please do put them in the chat or send them to us via email, and we can pick them up afterwards. But Alexis, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Neil, it's Tony Rutherford here from the Northeast. I would just like to say, Alexis, you've put some very, very valid points over. As I say, that have certainly given me the actual some reflection. And as I say, I think, and what I'll do is I'll be adding these on to my actual colleagues at Northern Police, because I think that it was a very, very good presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony. I really appreciate your feedback. Thanks. And if you need anything, just so that everyone got my email, it's alexis@fortistherapy.co.uk. I don't know if Joe can put that in the chat for me. That would be great. Yeah, alexis@fortistherapy.co.uk. I'm happy if you want to drop me an email, or if there's anything else you want to chat about. It's not a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys. Have a good day.
Bye. Have a good week.